You walk through the echoing stone halls of the medieval throne room, torches flickering against carved columns that tell tales of glory, conquest, and blood. Here sits a king whose destiny, like his crown, is tarnished by the most forbidden love. He leans forward on his high-backed chair, velvet cushions beneath cold fingers, and across dims the silhouette of a woman, regal, fair-haired, eyes shadowed by scandal. She is not a foreign queen, but his sister. When he asked her hand, not just the court but the kingdom froze. Every noble from the north gate to the southern ramparts knows this marriage defied both church and conscience. Yet in that moment, nothing felt shocking to you, because love, twisted by power, can blind even the brightest crown. You sense how his heart pounded when he addressed her not as sister, but as consort, and how the nobles shifted uneasily, their eyes darting like sparrows caught in a storm. In that moment, the throne's golden sheen lost its shine. You're about to hear why he crossed that line and what it cost him, and why the kingdom that bent to his will ultimately broke. His name was King Roderick II of Westumbria, and his sister Princess Elswith. It was a match that defied every taboo. Blood and proximity were never meant to mix in solemn vows. But in the depth of winter 1124, amidst plague and revolt, rumors swirled that the king had grown desperate for love, for loyalty, for a cure to the chaos crushing his land. Elswith was the only person he could trust, the only one whose grief mirrored his own. In the years before, the kingdom had suffered famine, raiders tearing villages, the church pushing papal taxes that bled coffers dry. Roderick felt cornered, isolated. His queen had died, a queen from a noble house. The court wanted him to remarry, to secure an alliance, to produce heirs. But all suitable partners meant more foreign influence, more demands. Elswith, though forbidden, would answer only to him, not to some distant baron, not to a rival duke. His sister knew the burdens of the crown. She bore his sorrows. Still, even you, watching from the sidelines, feel the kingdom's throat tighten. You see courtiers exchange fearful glances, worried not just about scandal, but about divine retribution. The bishops speak faintly in Latin of incest adulterous, of sin that invites curses. Mothers clutch their children tight, whispering prayers for the fall of a mad line. In the countryside, the peasants mutter of wolves in crowns, and the church bells toll longer, each clang echoing doom. By the end of this section, you feel a quiet dread, because Roderick's choice wasn't made in malice. He was a man undone, by grief, by isolation, by trust so thin only blood could hold it. But such desperate bonds always exact a price, and loyalty of that depth breeds ruin. In the next section, you'll learn how the rest of the court reacted, and how the fate of the kingdom began to unravel. You hold your breath as the archbishop mounts the steps to the pulpit, robes swishing like wings over cold stone. His voice reverberates through the chapel, condemning the union as a sin that shatters the natural order. Roderick's face remains unreadable, his jaw tense, but Elswith stands beside him, head bowed, conviction in her eyes that embers hope into your heart, even as the court recoils. Within days, whispers bloom into rebellion. Lords from the northern castles band together, declaring the king's marriage to his sister an affront to God and crown. They rally their men-at-arms, banners raised, horse chains clatter in their stables. If royal blood cannot obey divine law, they say, then loyalty unto death is forfeit. You sense lines drawn not by geography but by belief, some insisting on law, others clinging to the shadow of a bond only blood can forge. At the same time, winter deepens. Famine lashes the realm. Granaries empty faster than they can be filled. Peasants riot demanding bread. In market squares you step over bodies. Hungry men collapsed in the cold. Elswith organizes relief efforts, rationing grain. The king praises her publicly, calls her the kingdom's comfort. But murmurs persist. Is she queen by virtue of love? Or is her position a facade to legitimize forbidden kinship? Meanwhile, the church tightens its grip. Bishops demand an annulment. Papal legates arrive on solemn horses, their vestments trailing sin. They bring letters from the Pope himself, threatening excommunication, not just of Roderick and Elswyth, but of every soul who touches their decrees. You can taste fear in the air. Even the bravest knights shift uneasily. Honor-bound, they cannot ignore the threat of being banished from Christendom. But Roderick doesn't bow. At a council in the Great Hall, beneath tapestries that depict his ancestors, he stands and declares that love can transcend law, that when law fails, the bonds of blood endure. He is met with gasps, fists slamming oak tables, allegiances fracture, advisors walk out, lords pull their swords from scabbards. You feel the fracture in the air like the first crack in a dam. The price of that union is already being paid. Political isolation, economic collapse, spiritual condemnation. And as you step away from that hall, you carry with you the weight of inevitability. Divine law versus human love, state versus family bond. You sense that Roderick's decision, once a desperate clasp at loyalty, is spiraling into catastrophe. In the next section, you'll witness how betrayal spreads through the nobility and how war begins at home. You ride with the northern lords under grey skies, their horses' hooves slick with mud from recent frost. Their banners flutter, black wolves on silver, symbols of a crusade in name if not in faith. These men are not thieves, they are courtiers who once swore fealty. Now they march to depose their king, saying his incestuous union brings ruin to realms and souls. They call themselves the Purging Hosts, and they ride behind banners not of rebellion, but of divine restoration. Back in the capital, you walk through deserted streets where children huddle in doorways. Elswyth makes rounds with a satchel of coins and bread, but as she approaches a small cottage, a man recoils, muttering that the royal sister has corrupted the household already. Rage and worship twist side by side in people's hearts. Love for their rulers, bitterness for their hunger, fear for their souls. It's rare to see rebellion born not of greed, but despair. Meanwhile, in a frost-chilled war council, warlords debate strategy. Should they besiege the palace or leave Roderick in place but strip him of Elswyth's title? Should they attack with force or blockade for surrender? In the corner, the king's vizier crumples a parchment while weeping. He knows the cost. If the rebels win, blood will flow. If they lose, the church will exact its revenge. You feel the gravity in the parchment's lines, the ink soaked in loyalty's end. Closer to the palace, a rumor spreads. Elswyth is pregnant. You stand in the chapel's shadows as knights and prelates whisper that the child would be tainted by sin, an abomination. Some bishops call for immediate exorcism. Others, more political, insist any heir from this union would delegitimize the throne forever. The threat is not just spiritual, it becomes dynastic. You sense the room grow smaller with whispered fears. That same night, you glimpse Roderick pacing in his private gardens. Snow drifts around his boots. He whispers to the moon, words broken by tears. He failed as king, yes, but he cannot lose his sister, not to rebellion, not to the church, not even to death. You see resolve in the lines of his face, love turned iron. But where iron is hardened, it easily shatters, and the hour for that break is fast approaching. By the end of this section, war crackles at the doors. Kingdom divided, faith offended, love condemned. You feel the pulse of history ready to snap. In the next section, you'll witness betrayal inside the palace, and how the kingdom's fate hangs by a dagger's thread. You slip through the corridors of the palace as midnight oil burns low. Servants snore in gated alcoves. Tapestries seem to watch as shadows stretch across marble. In an inner chamber, the vizier kneels before Elswyth, whispering betrayal. He brings letters from the northern lords. Surrender her, they say, or we march. In his eyes, you read fear, not loyalty. Not of Roderick, but of the church and of death. Elswyth's eyes flick open. She's pale, delicate, but not fragile. She hears the vizier promise safe retreat for the royal family, if she agrees to leave. The sacrifice weighs in your chest like a stone. To save her brother, must she flee or remain? and watch their throne burn. The night holds its breath. Meanwhile, in the war tent at the north, the rebel lords plan their siege. Siege towers, catapult rounds, starvation tactics. They see the gold-lit palace as the heart they must crush. And yet, in their whispers, you hear another word, restoration. They speak of reclaiming the realm, of purging sin. But every arc of those words is forged in steel and blood, and you wonder, will restoration demand the blood of kin? At dawn, Elswith strides into the chapel, robes trailing. She petitions the archbishop herself. Perform a ceremony of renunciation, an annulment that she will deliver not to the king, but to God. You feel her conviction. Love can be divine without being fatal. Her voice trembles only once when she speaks of Roderick's anguish. But each word is clearer than a trumpet. Word travels fast. You step into the courtyard to watch as guards draw their swords. Some hesitantly, others with conviction. They've chosen sides, king or church, blood or law. And though they guard the throne, they too are fragile. Human as you, with families, fears. When one guard steps forward to end it, another stops him. A standoff frozen in steel gleam and breath. As you depart that night, the air tastes of betrayal and resolve. Elswith has offered her freedom. The court is divided. Death and salvation both hang in the balance. And you feel the tension of a blade hovering inches from flesh. In the next section, you'll see what happens when war finally comes knocking, and what price is paid for a love that defied every order. You hear the first clash of steel at dawn. Siege towers scrape against palace walls. Banners thrash in the wind. The court panic, horses rear, trumpets scream, drums pound a war rhythm. The king rallies loyalist knights. Some wear Elswith's colors in a final pledge. The ground trembles as forces collide. Loyalty fights loyalty, blood clashing with belief. In the throne room, Elswith stands by her brother's side. She grips his hand, pale knuckles clenched. The windows shatter from catapult fire. Dust coats their gowns. The heart of the palace rings with alarm, yet she remains, not as captive, but as guard of his humanity. You see that bond still unbroken, even as walls crumble. Outside, the purging hosts pour through breached gates. Steel meets shield. The roar of battle drowns the prayers in the chapel beyond. Nobles fall, banners burn. The siege is not swift, it is a horror. And every strike, every downed guard, every fallen lord marks the cost of incest, of broken law, of forbidden love. You feel the weight of every body. And then, you catch Elswith's gaze in the chaos. She sees the noise, the blood, and makes her choice. She steps between the combatants. Her robe stained with dust and grief, she lifts her voice above the blades. Stop this madness. The fighting falters, blades lower. For a moment, silence. A fragile peace, forged not by sword, but by grief. The archbishop steps forward and demands her abdication. Elswith casts down her crown and steps back. She says, "Let this union end. My position goes so the kingdom might live." You catch her tears in torchlight, not feral but deliberate sacrifice. She offers her status so that war might cease. That offer fractures the siege. Some knights sheath swords, repelled more by mercy than obedience. The purging hosts slow, banners wilt. In the stillness you feel the heart of the kingdom pulse, wounded but alive. Yet you sense a shattering, one that cannot be undone by peace alone. In the final section, you'll see the true price paid, not in battle, but in legacy. You stand in the ashes of the courtyard, walls scarred, banners torn, morning sun weak through smoke. The siege is over. The purging hosts stand at the gates, but the fighting has ceased. The court is broken. Bodies lie strewn. And in the center, Elswith, kneeling on cold stones, hands empty, her sacrifice complete. The king, bareheaded, bows before her. You wonder, what is reclaimed when human kinship renounces itself? In the weeks that follow, the kingdom trembles. The church reasserts control. Bishops return to the cathedrals. Roderick abdicates, retreats into a monastery to pray out the guilt of his name. You walk past the empty throne room, dust motes dancing in shafts of sunlight, and you sense how love, even forbidden, created its own undoing. Elswyth retreats to a convent. She takes the veil, her hair shorn, her crown replaced by fabric. You stand across the cloister walls and hear her voice, calm, resolved. She prays not just for forgiveness, but for the kingdom's healing. Her eyes, when you catch them, hold no regret, only understanding of the cost of love defied. The realm endures, slowly, painfully. The famine ends. Crops grow again. Lords pay tithes, merchants return. Yet the memory remains. Chronicles in scripture condemn the incest. Poetry laments the sacrifice. Songs tell of a king who married his sister and a princess who married grief. And every recounting asks, was love worth the ruin? As centuries pass, the story becomes legend. In your mind, you hold both sorrow and awe. Because Elswyth did what no queen ever should have to do, give up the love that could save a throne, to save the land. And Roderick, once consumed by forbidden devotion, found redemption not in love, but in faith and repentance. You close the book on this tale, feeling the weight of its lesson. Some bonds, even when born of blood, demand a price greater than you can bear, irrespective of love's claim. It's a story that whispers through ages, that the throne cannot protect blood, and that sometimes sacrifice is the only way a kingdom survives.